The massive ship hung in space like a dark metal shark, its hull gleaming with a dull purple-gray shine that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Commander Daewoo stood on the bridge, his scaled hands clasped behind his back, watching the blue-green planet grow larger on the main viewing screen. Earth looked peaceful, almost innocent, a trait that made him smile with cruel anticipation. Daewoo's species, the Kalmar, had conquered hundreds of worlds. They were hunters first, conquerors second, and they approached each new planet like a skilled predator sizing up its next meal. This planet, Earth, looked like so many others they had subdued. Primitive technologies, scattered populations, no unified planetary defense. Preliminary scans complete, announced Jae-sung, the lead reconnaissance officer. His voice was crisp, professional, filled with the confidence of someone who had seen countless planetary invasions. Multiple ecological zones detected. Highest potential for successful hunt identified in the northwestern region of the largest western landmass. The bridge crew waited in silence. Each member of the invasion force had been selected for their exceptional hunting skills. They wore tight-fitting battle suits that could change color and texture to match any environment. Sensors built into their suits could detect the smallest movement, track heat signatures from kilometers away, and provide instant tactical analysis. Daewoo's eyes, deep black with a hint of silvery reflection, studied the holographic displays. Mountains, dense forests, minimal human infrastructure, perfect hunting ground. Prepare the first wave, he commanded. 12 of our best hunters will make initial contact. Full stealth protocols. 12 hunters. 12 of the most skilled trackers and killers in the entire Kalmar fleet. Each one had successfully hunted on multiple planets. Each one carried weapons that could turn living matter into ash in milliseconds. Each one believed this would be another simple mission. They had no idea how wrong they would be. The dropships were silent machines, designed to enter planetary atmospheres without creating any detectable heat signature. They looked more like living metal creatures than traditional spacecraft. As they descended through Earth's atmosphere, they moved with a predator's grace. Smooth, calculated, deadly. Jae-sung, who would lead the ground team, reviewed the mission parameters one last time. Their objective was simple: evaluate the planet's defensive capabilities, identify potential resistance, and prepare for full-scale invasion. Previous intelligence suggested minimal technological development. The humans seemed more interested in internal conflicts than potential extraterrestrial threats. The forest floor was a carpet of green and brown when the dropships touched down. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches creating a dense canopy that blocked most sunlight. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Scanning, muttered Hyun-ki, the team's tactical specialist. His fingers danced across multiple sensor interfaces, looking for any sign of potential threat. No large heat signatures detected. Local wildlife appears minimal. What the Kalmar didn't understand was that silence on Earth meant something entirely different. Silence here wasn't emptiness. Silence was a signal. Silence was a warning. As the first hunters stepped out of their dropships, the forest seemed to watch. Microscopic organisms in the soil began to shift. Roots underneath the ground started to move almost imperceptibly. The ecosystem was becoming aware of the intruders. Daewoo's voice crackled through their communication systems. "Remember," he said, "we are the hunters. Stay alert. Stay together. This planet will be another mark in our conquest log by tomorrow." If only he knew how wrong he would be. The hunt was about to begin, and Earth was preparing to show these invaders exactly why no one had successfully conquered its territories before. The forest floor crunched softly under the hunters' advanced boots. Each step was carefully measured, calculated to produce minimal sound. Jae-sung moved at the front of the group, his scanning device sweeping back and forth across the dense woodland. Thick trees surrounded them, their branches creating a green and brown maze that seemed to shift and change with every passing moment. "Maintain tight formation," Jae-sung whispered into the team's communication system. 12 hunters moved as one, their battle suits changing color to match the forest's browns and greens. They looked like living shadows, barely distinguishable from the surrounding environment. Hyun-ki watched his tactical display, his fingers moving quickly across the sensor interface. Something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No bird sounds, no small animal movements, just silence and the soft rustle of leaves. Checking environmental readings, he reported. His voice was calm, but a tiny edge of tension crept into his words. The sensors showed strange readings. Microscopic life forms were moving in patterns that made no sense. Soil compositions were changing in ways that defied normal ecological behavior. The first hunter disappeared without a sound. One moment Park Min was there, checking her readings on his wrist device. The next moment, nothing. No alarm, no distress signal, just empty space where a skilled hunter had been standing moments before. Jae-sung's head snapped around. Park Min. He called softly. No response. The tactical team began to spread out, searching for any sign of their missing companion. Their advanced scanning equipment showed nothing. No energy signatures, no heat traces, no indication of what might have happened. Maintain position, Jae-sung commanded. But his own confidence was starting to crack. Another hunter vanished, then another. Kim Jun was the third to disappear. One moment he was scanning a cluster of strange mushrooms that seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. The next moment, he was gone. The mushrooms continued to pulse, almost like they were breathing. Hyun-ki's sensors began to go crazy. Small electrical disruptions appeared and disappeared across the forest floor. Microscopic organisms were moving in patterns that looked almost like communication. But that was impossible. These were just simple Earth life forms. Weren't they? Commander Daewoo, Jae-sung spoke into his communication device. We are experiencing unexpected complications. His voice remained professional, but a thread of uncertainty ran beneath his words. The forest seemed to be watching them, waiting. By the end of the first day, only 4 hunters remained of the original 12. They huddled together, their backs pressed against each other, scanning the forest with increasing desperation. What they didn't know was that Earth was studying them. Every movement, every breath, every tiny piece of technology they carried. The planet was learning, and it was preparing to defend itself. Hyun-ki noticed something strange about the roots near their feet. They seemed to be moving, just a little, almost imperceptibly, but moving. Something is wrong, he whispered to Jae-sung. This forest is not what we expected. The trees loomed overhead. The roots continued to move, slowly, deliberately. The hunt had begun. But who was hunting whom? Min-ho watched in horror as something impossible happened. His teammate was being slowly digested by a plant that should not be able to move. The carnivorous organism wrapped its tendrils around the hunter, pulling him into a cluster of strange, pulsing leaves. No sound came from the struggling hunter. No alarm, just slow, methodical consumption. Only 4 hunters remained now. They had stopped believing this was a simple mission. This was no longer a hunt. They were the ones being hunted. Jae-sung checked his weapon, a high-powered energy rifle that could turn most living things to ash in seconds. It felt useless here. The forest seemed to laugh at their technology. Every tool they had brought became less effective with each passing hour. The ground beneath their feet was alive in ways they could not understand. Roots moved like fingers. Tiny organisms in the soil communicated in patterns too complex for their sensors to decode. The entire ecosystem worked together, and it was studying the invaders. We need to retreat, Hyun-ki said. His voice was calm, but fear lived underneath his words. The tactical specialist had seen hundreds of planetary invasions. He had never seen anything like this. Min-ho's eyes darted between the trees. Something was watching them. Not just watching, hunting them. The forest was a living weapon, and they were trapped in its killing zone. A strange fungus grew on a nearby tree trunk. It seemed to pulse with a soft green light. Minho noticed tiny spores drifting through the air. They moved with purpose, not like normal plant particles. They moved like tiny hunters seeking their prey. Another hunter fell. This time, it was a slow process. Microscopic organisms attacked from every direction. They crawled into the hunter's protective suit. They found tiny gaps in the technology. They worked together with an intelligence that should be impossible for simple life forms. Jae-sung realized something important. This was not just a forest. This was a planet-wide defense system. Every living thing was connected. Every organism worked together to protect the whole. The hunters' advanced technology meant nothing here. Their weapons were useless. Their communication systems were failing. The planet was learning about them faster than they could learn about the planet. Minho watched a root slowly wrap around his teammate's leg. The hunter did not even have time to scream. One moment he was there. The next moment, he was gone, pulled down into the earth like he had never existed. "We are not the hunters," Minho whispered. "We are the prey." Hyunki's sensors went crazy. Electrical signals moved through the ground. Microscopic life forms communicated in complex patterns. The entire forest was a single living organism, and it was preparing to eliminate the threat. The two remaining hunters huddled together. Their advanced battle suits, which had worked on hundreds of worlds, were now nothing more than thin layers of failing protection. The forest continued to watch, to plan, to hunt. Earth was teaching them a lesson they would never forget. Technological superiority meant nothing against a planet that could think, adapt, and defend itself with ruthless efficiency. The hunt was almost over, and the planet was about to win. Commander Daewoo stared at the communication screen in disbelief. The messages from his ground team were broken, incomplete. Nothing made sense. "Repeat your status," he demanded. Static was his only answer. On the ship's bridge, the invasion team watched with growing worry. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had faced resistance before, but never like this. The first reports had been strange. Hunters disappearing without a trace, communication systems failing, weapons becoming useless against an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Hyunki's last transmission was the most disturbing. "The planet is alive," he had said. "It's thinking. It's hunting us." Those words made no sense. Planets were not alive. Planets did not hunt. Planets were just rocks and dirt and water, weren't they? Spores began to fill the air around the remaining hunters. They looked harmless. Tiny green particles drifting on invisible winds. But these were not normal spores. These were weapons. The spores entered through the smallest gaps in their protective suits. They found ways inside that no normal biological organism should be able to find. They worked together. They communicated. They planned. One hunter began to cough. Then another. Their advanced medical systems could not understand what was happening. The spores were changing, adapting, learning how to break down the hunter's biology. Microscopic organisms in the soil began to move in patterns that looked like communication. Roots from different trees connected underground. Fungi spread their networks across the forest floor. Everything was talking. Everything was working together. Commander Daewoo realized something was very wrong. This was not a simple planetary invasion. This was a war against an ecosystem that thought like a single massive brain. The ship's sensors went crazy. Electrical signals moved through the ground in ways that made no sense. The planet was studying them, learning about them, preparing to destroy them. Trees moved, not with wind, not with normal biological processes. They moved with purpose. Roots reached out like fingers. Branches shifted to block escape routes. The entire forest was a living weapon. Poison began to work its way through the hunter's systems. Not a normal poison. Something that targeted their specific biology. Something that had been created just for them in minutes. The Kalmar had weapons that could destroy entire civilizations. They had technology that could turn planets to dust. But those weapons meant nothing here. Earth was fighting back, and Earth was winning. Commander Daewoo watched the communication screens. One by one, the signals from the ground team went dark. No distress calls, no final messages, just silence. The planet was silent, but it was anything but peaceful. The invasion was over, and the hunters had become the hunted. Jae-sung and Hyun-ki were the only hunters left. They had stopped being hunters. Now they were just trying to survive. The forest was a nightmare. Every shadow could hide death. Every step might be their last. Their advanced technology meant nothing here. The planet was alive, and it was hunting them. Hyun-ki's tactical suit was falling apart. Microscopic organisms had found ways to break down its protective layers. His communication systems were dead. No way to call for help. No way to warn the invasion fleet. "We need to move," Jae-sung whispered. His voice was dry. His throat burned from the strange spores that filled the air. They had been breathing these spores for hours. Each breath made them weaker. The roots of the trees moved around them, not like normal roots. These moved like fingers, like they were thinking, searching, hunting. A strange mushroom grew nearby. It pulsed with a soft green light. Hyun-ki had seen it change shape 3 times in the last hour. Impossible for a normal mushroom. But nothing here was normal. Their weapons were useless now. Energy rifles that could burn through metal now sparked weakly. The forest had found ways to make their technology fail. Tiny organisms ate through power cells. Electrical systems went crazy. Jae-sung looked at his friend. Hyun-ki was dying. Poison from the forest had entered his body. Not a normal poison. Something created just for their specific biology. The planet was learning, adapting, killing. "We won't make it," Hyun-ki said. Blood leaked from his mouth. Strange green veins ran across his skin. The forest was changing him from the inside. A root burst through the ground. It moved like a snake, fast, precise, hungry. Jae-sung jumped back, but he was slow, tired, dying. The forest watched them, every tree, every plant, every tiny organism in the soil. They were all connected. They all worked together, and they all wanted these invaders gone. Jae-sung remembered the hundreds of worlds they had conquered, the planets they had hunted, the civilizations they had destroyed. Now they were the ones being hunted. Another root burst from the ground. It wrapped around Hyun-ki's leg. He didn't even have time to scream. One moment he was there. The next moment, he was gone, pulled down into the earth like he had never existed. Jae-sung was alone now. The last hunter. The last invader. The trees seemed to lean closer. The roots moved faster. The spores in the air became thicker. Everything was closing in. Earth had a message for these invaders. A simple message. "You are not welcome here." Jae-sung fell to his knees. The forest was alive. The forest was thinking. The forest was killing. And the forest was winning. Deep underground, something was happening. Microscopic organisms that had existed for millions of years began to work together. They were not just simple life forms. They were a complex network, a living computer made of biology. The last hunter, Jae-sung, had no idea what was really happening. He thought he was fighting a forest, but he was fighting an entire planet. Bacteria in the soil began to change. They shared information faster than any computer could. They learned about the alien invaders. They created defenses. They communicated in ways no one could understand. Fungi networks spread underground. They connected trees. They connected plants. They shared information across hundreds of kilometers. Every living thing was talking. Every living thing was working together. In one moment, a tiny bacterium would learn something about the alien hunters. In the next moment, that information would spread to millions of other organisms. The entire planet was a single thinking system. The invasion fleet in space began to notice strange things. Their sensors went crazy. Electrical signals moved in impossible patterns. The planet was doing something. But what? Commander Daewoo watched his screens with growing fear. This was not like any planetary defense he had ever seen. This was something else. Something alive. The fungi underground created special chemicals. These chemicals were weapons, but not normal weapons. They were designed to attack the specific biology of the alien hunters. Created in minutes, adapted perfectly. Trees began to move, not with wind, not with normal plant movements. They moved with purpose. Their roots connected underground. They shared information. They prepared defenses. Tiny insects that normally lived in the soil became something more. They worked together. They became part of the planet's defense system. Millions of small organisms that would normally be separate now acted as one single weapon. The planet was thinking. The planet was alive. Jae-sung's body began to change. The forest's chemicals worked their way through his system. He was becoming part of the planet's defense. His body would feed the soil. His technology would be broken down and used. Nothing would be wasted. The invasion fleet in space watched in horror. Their sensors showed impossible things. The entire planet was a single living system. Every plant, every animal, every tiny organism worked together. Earth had defense systems that no one had ever seen before. Systems that could think. Systems that could learn. Systems that could kill. The Kalmar had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had destroyed civilizations. They had killed billions. But Earth was different. Earth was fighting back. Hyun-Ki's hands shook as he tried to activate the emergency beacon. His body was changing. The forest was inside him now. Strange green veins ran across his skin. His mind saw things differently. He understood now. The invasion fleet waited in space. They watched. They listened. But they did not understand what was happening on the planet below. Hyun-Ki's communication device sparked to life, but the message was not what the fleet expected. It was not a call for help. It was a warning. "Do not approach," the message said. The words came out strange. Part machine. Part something else. The planet is alive. Commander Daewoo listened to the broken transmission. Fear filled the ship's bridge. These were not the words of a hunter. These were the words of something else. Something changed. Hyun-Ki saw the world differently now. He could feel the roots underground. He could hear the tiny organisms talking. The forest had changed him. He was part of the planet now. Memories of his past life became distant. The worlds they had conquered. The civilizations they had destroyed. None of that mattered anymore. Only the planet mattered now. The invasion fleet's sensors showed strange things. Biological signals moved in impossible ways. The planet was doing something. But what? Tiny organisms continued their work. They broke down the hunter's technology. They studied everything. They learned faster than any computer could learn. Hyun-Ki's body was becoming something new. Part alien, part Earth, something in between. The forest had found a way to understand the invaders, to learn from them, to change them. Nothing would be wasted. The communication device continued to send its message. "Stay away. Do not come here. The planet is alive." Commander Daewoo watched the screens. His best hunters were gone. Disappeared into a planet that should not be able to think, should not be able to fight back. But it was fighting back. Hyun-Ki could feel the entire planet now. Every tree, every plant, every tiny organism in the soil. They were all connected. They all worked together. He was becoming part of that connection. The invasion fleet began to understand. This was not a normal planet. This was something else. The living system more complex than anything they had ever seen. Hyun-Ki's last thought as a pure alien was simple. They had come to hunt. But they had become the hunted. The planet had won. And it was just getting started. The invasion fleet received the final transmission. Broken. Strange. Impossible to understand completely. Commander Daewoo listened with growing horror. The message was not a typical distress call. It was something else. Part warning. Part something more complicated. The voice sounded part alien. Part something new. Something that was not fully alive. Not fully machine. Do not come back, the message said. The planet is watching. The planet is learning. Computers on the invasion ship tried to decode the message. They failed. The transmission contained biological signals that no computer could understand. It was like the message was alive. The Kalmar had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had destroyed civilizations without thinking. They had hunted and killed billions. But this was different. This planet had fought back. Deep in the forest, what remained of the hunters continued to change. Biological systems merged. Alien technology broke down. The planet continued its work of understanding, of learning. Microscopic organisms worked together. They studied the alien technology. They learned from it. They prepared defenses for future invasions. The invasion fleet's databases began to update. A new classification was added for this planet. Extreme Federati LEVL. Do not APPRH. Commander Daewoo knew something important had happened. This was not a normal planetary defense. This was something else. A living system more complex than anything they had ever seen. Humans continued their daily lives. They had no idea how close they had come to destruction. They had no idea how their planet had just fought off an alien invasion. The forest remained silent, but it was watching, waiting. Somewhere deep underground, something continued to grow. Part alien, part Earth, something new, something that remembered the invasion, something that was preparing. The Kalmar would not return, but other threats might come, and the planet would be ready. Humanity slept. The cities continued their normal life. No one knew how close they had come to total destruction. The planet had won its first test. It was waiting for the next one.